Hey guys! Sorry to interrupt. Today I'm going to explain a new and interesting anime, Akashic Records of Bastard Magic Instructor, so make sure to subscribe the channel and like the video. Glenn was a disgusting and ugly orphan boy who loved reading stories. One day, he came across a tale about a powerful magician facing off against a demon lord. The demon lord asked the magician why he fought so hard and strongly against him. The magician said he was fighting to protect something important to him. That's what gave him the strength to keep on fighting, no matter what. So, the battle raged on and the magician used some holy fire to finish off the demon lord, and that was that. As Glenn grew up, he wanted to be a magician just like the one in the story. He wanted to be a magician of justice. When he turned 15, managed to join the kingdom's army and became the strongest mage with his invincible original spell. One day, Princess Hermione was taken away by some evil mages. The queen fell into despair and begged Glenn to save the princess. Glenn managed to find the princess and save her from the present evildoers. The princess started to scream, but Glenn told her to be quiet, mentioning that there were still enemies around and promised to always protect her. There, he met his companion, Sarah, who really loved his personality. But there was a problem. Glenn started to hate magic. He wanted to originally be someone who could help people, but the only thing he did was to dirty his hands with the blood of others. Despite his emotions, Glenn never gave up on his dream because Sarah was there to support him. Until one day, the two went on a mission and she lost her life. Glenn couldn't protect her. From that moment, Glenn quit being a mage and ran away, returning to his adoptive mother's house. Celica, one of the strongest mages in the world. He freeloaded on her for a whole year, lying around and being a pathetic loser. Until Celica came up with a proposal. She wanted him to become a substitute teacher in a mage academy. He didn't want to do it, claiming he wasn't qualified. But Celica insisted and threatened to fry him up with her magic. She even made a hole in a house to show she meant it. Glenn got scared and finally agreed. A few days later, we find ourselves in Fajit, a city in the Alzano Empire. There's this girl named Rumia who goes to that magical school. One day, she sees an old man on the street who hurt his finger. She's a nice girl, so she goes over to help. Using her healing magic, she fixes up the man's finger real good. He's so impressed and thanks her, saying how awesome she is. But here's the thing, using magic outside the school is a no-no. So she kind of playfully tells the man, "Hey, you gotta keep this a secret." And the man, with a playful wink, promises to do just that. One day, Rumia was walking to school, and her friend Sistine from the same academy joined her. They chatted about a professor who quit, and they were kinda worried about who their new teacher would be. As they strolled along, a boy came running and yelled at them to move out of the way. He was super scared he'd crash into them. Sistine, quick thinker that she was, used her magic shield to block him, but she sent him flying into the air and he landed in a fountain. The girls rushed over to check on him, and to their relief, he popped out of the water and asked if they were okay. Now, on the roof of one of the academy's buildings, another girl was waiting for someone, but that someone was running late, and she was not happy about it. Back to Sistine and Rumia, they kept talking to the boy who'd bumped into them. He kept asking if they were okay, and then he dropped a kinda weird idea. He acted like it was their fault they bumped into him and said they might get in trouble unless they made a deal with him. He started checking Rumia's height and all that, which made her uncomfortable. So Sistine used her magic shield again. Meanwhile, the whole school was wondering where the substitute teacher was. The class was waiting, getting more and more impatient because the class period was almost over. They were complaining and talking about filing a complaint with the student body because it was so unprofessional. But finally, the teacher showed up, and guess what? It was the same guy that Sistine and Rumia ran into earlier. He acted like he didn't know them and introduced himself as Glenn. He seemed super not interested in teaching and started talking about his hobbies, which Sistine found pretty boring. In class, the new teacher, Glenn, wrote on the board that the students should do self-study because he was too tired. He even laid his head on the table and fell asleep. The students were super surprised, especially Sistine, who wasn't going to let that slide. Meanwhile, another teacher who was worried about Glenn being late argued with the principal. He knew Glenn wasn't cut out for teaching the kind of students they had, and he said Glenn would just tell them to self-study, which is exactly what happened. Then, the principal dropped a bombshell. Glenn didn't even have a teaching license. But the principal trusted a powerful professor at the academy named Celica, who had recommended Glenn. Holly, the teacher who was worried, called Celica a witch as soon as she walked in, but she overheard him. She didn't care about being called a witch, but didn't want anyone bad-mouthing Glenn. She scared Holly into taking back what he said, and he ran away, stuttering an apology. Back in class, Glenn was trying to act like a teacher, but he wasn't taking it seriously. His handwriting was sloppy, and Sistine couldn't even read what he wrote, although Rumia didn't have any trouble. When a student asked about a spell translation, Glenn couldn't find it in the book and told her to figure it out herself. This made Sistine really mad, and she called Glenn out for being a bad teacher. He defended himself, saying he couldn't just make stuff up. Then the bell rang, and he left without giving them any homework or anything. The girls went to the locker rooms to change and get ready for their next class. Sistine was fuming about Glenn not taking things seriously, and Rumia was worried about her friend. Sistine needed some healing, so she jumped on Rumia's chest, and that made her a little less angry. Glenn got impatient and barged into the locker room while the girls were still changing. They screamed at him to get out, but he refused and wanted to talk about the cliché turn of events. He didn't want to be shamed for seeing them, and that made the girls kick him out and gave him a nosebleed. Later, Sistine sat by the window in the cafeteria and wondered why they canceled the class Glenn was supposed to teach just because he got hurt. She felt like she was wasting time when she should be learning about the mystery of Malgarius, a castle in the sky, to fulfill her promise to her grandfather. Then, Glenn showed up with his lunch tray, and Sistine was instantly mad. Rumia tried to start a conversation with Glenn about his food, but the tension was thick in the air. Glenn told her that eating was one of his favorite things, especially when he didn't have to cook the food himself. He described how delicious it tasted, and Sistine said she might try it one day. But Glenn was feeling generous and shared some of his food with her. She liked it a lot, and Glenn asked if it was all alright. At first, Sistine acted all grumpy and said it was none of his business. But then she told him that she ate lightly because she didn't want to fall asleep during class. She added that since he was the one teaching, she didn't mind falling into a coma. This caught the attention of the students around them, and Glenn asked if Sistine had something to say to him. Before she could reply, he quickly shoved a spoonful of food into her mouth. After swallowing, he took some of her food from her plate, which made Sistine pretty mad. She wondered if he really called himself a teacher with such behavior, and he just said it was temporary. The next day in class, Glenn did the same old self-study thing. He just didn't want to teach. He was super lazy and had no interest in trying, and the following days were no different. He seemed even less excited than before, like all he wanted was to get to class and take a nap on his desk. This really bummed out the students, and it totally frustrated Sistine. One day, Sistine had enough. She got up all annoyed and complained about Glenn's behavior. She said she came from a long line of nobles, and if she told her dad about this, he'd have Glenn fired. Well, Glenn surprised everyone. He took Sistine's hand and told her to go ahead and complain. He wanted to be fired. He never wanted to work at the school in the first place, but he couldn't quit because of Celica. He figured if he got fired, she wouldn't do anything to him, and he'd be out of a job just like he wanted. This made the students super curious, and Sistine didn't back down. She challenged Glenn to a magic duel right then and there. Education meant a lot to her because it was the path to solving the mystery of Malgarius. She told Glenn that if she won, he had to change his ways. And she knew she'd win because he didn't respect magic at all. Glenn agreed, but he asked her if she'd be okay with his request if he won. It sounded kinda ominous. They took their duel outside and all the students watched. Glenn said they'd only use shock magic, which is all about electricity. The students were wondering who would come out on top. Sistine gave herself a little pep talk to gain courage, and then she fired her first shot. It hit Glenn right on the mark, surprising everyone because they thought Glenn would be better. But Glenn, he acted like he gave her a chance on purpose. He tried to zap her back, but Sistine shocked him again and again. She asked if he couldn't cast the spell, and he pretended like he could but just wanted her to win. The students knew he was lying, but he acted like they were almost tied when she had zapped him 3 times, and he only got 1 on her. He even pretended like he never agreed to be a better teacher and just laughed it off before running away. The next day, Glenn still didn't take his classes seriously. He didn't care about keeping his promise to Sistine at all. Lynn, one of the students, asked him a question about magic because self-study wasn't working for her, and she wanted to understand better. But Sistine told Lynn not to ask Glenn for help because he didn't understand the greatness of magic. This made Glenn ask Sistine about the benefits of magic to humanity. He argued that fields like medicine or science could do the same things magic does. Sistine tried to defend magic, saying how amazing and truthful it was. But Glenn interrupted her and said that magic was only good for killing, explaining how effective it was in ending someone's life. This made Sistine super mad, and she slapped him before leaving the classroom crying. Nobody expected that to happen, and it shocked everyone. Later, Glenn went to the rooftop of the academy and reflected on his behavior. He and Sistine had different ideas about magic, and he probably looked down on her beliefs. He regretted upsetting her, even though he didn't admit it. He saw Rumia in the lab trying to practice magic on her own, so he went over to her. He wasn't happy about her using the lab without supervision, but he let her continue working on the magic circle she was creating. Rumia didn't know how to make it work, and Glenn told her it needed a lot of mercury. He got some and poured it onto the circuit, helping Rumia make her circle work. This got her really excited. After their experiment, Glenn and Rumia started talking. She asked him what he did before becoming a teacher. He said he was unemployed for a year and lived off of silica. Rumia asked about what he did before that, but Glenn didn't want to talk about it. He started asking Rumia why she was interested in magic, and she said she wanted to repay a favor. She had been kidnapped by criminals years ago and was rescued by a powerful mage. That's why she wanted to learn more about magic. And that's for today. See you in next episode. Therefore, make sure to subscribe the channel and like the video and a comment below. Thanks for watching.